in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all Jajatas and Jasons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all Jajatas and Jasons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. I am Ike. This is my channel. Ike Gammon over here. We talk about being better and doing better. And we're here today to improve that elusive quality that we know that we do want in order to be more, shall we say, productive problem solvers, effective problem solvers in our lives, to the degree to which the problems that we need to solve require creativity. So we're talking about creativity today, and this is the second episode of a series. We started this out last Tuesday. How's it going, Dr. Thunder?
It's all right, man. How are you doing, man? It's good to see you.
Likewise. Good to see you guys in the chat as well. Checking for you, Lee, Roy, Atonement, Aaron B. We got the usuals trooping in. Make sure you guys like and share the video. Share on Facebook, WhatsApp, Signal, Instagram, thought thread messages, whatever it may be. So, you guys have one or two of those going on. Me out here capping. So, shout out. You want to give a shout out to our very early super chat?
Absolutely.
Already?
Little Rock 2517 with the $4.99 super chat. Yo.
Indeed. So, if I may, ladies and gentlemen, I think that if you missed last week's version of this, last week's episode where we started out this topic about creativity, you want to go back and check it out later. But let me give a quick recap, okay? First of all, in order to ground ourselves, in order to be able to at least have some kind of a working understanding of what we mean by creativity in this context, in the context of a show which is about getting things done, we talked about the fact that creativity can be broken down into these three aspects here. One is definitely a problem solving situation. You're solving problems where the problem is not prescriptive, right? The solution to the problem is not prescribed yet. You're not reinventing the wheel per se, right? The solution is not just out there, obvious, off the shelf. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is it often requires a certain kind of synthesis. What do I mean by that? It means you're taking different solutions, different observations from disparate aspects of your understanding. You're taking a little bit from nature, a little bit from science, a little bit from maybe you're trying to create some kind of new meal, and you take a little bit from Italian cooking, you take a little bit from baking, you take a little bit of this and that, and you cobble together, if you will, some Frankenstein, right? Something that is seemingly new as a result of a synthesis, bringing things together. And then number three, there is a cognitive function aspect of it, which has to do with intuition, Basically, what that means is thinking in fundamental terms, thinking in broad conceptual terms. And when you're able to think in broad conceptual terms and think about what's fundamental about a topic, let's say economics or physics or what have you, you're then able to synthesize easier. So points 2 and 3 are kind of related. The more you think intuitively, fundamentally, conceptually, and you more grounded you are in your thinking, okay, the more you're able to kind of skate from field to field, okay, and then combine the logic of these things and to create something new. So 3 things. Number 1, problem solving where the solution is not prescribed. Number 2, you're synthesizing, bringing things together. And then number 3, you're talking about fundamental, intuitive, conceptual kind of thinking. This is very good for solving problems, and that's why we're talking about it today. And then we reviewed a video which basically has or promises 15 ways to increase your creativity. Number 1, basically it says, hey, creativity is going to come in different forms for different people, but you're going to need to do some copying. You're going to need to do some, shall we say, studying of the ways other people have done it. You want to be
Research.
great. Research. Great way to put it. You're going to need to do some research, folks. And then number 2, it said you got to start. Okay. You got to start. You got to get in there. And this is more about getting ish done than necessarily creativity. This is about anything you got to do. Okay. You got to be a professional about it, having a lot of time, an allotted space, something that you're going to, a place and a time that you're going to dedicate to this task. And then you're going to need to just start. Okay. Now, number 3, it talked about the fact that you need alone time. This is not very complex. Okay, in order to think deeply, think fundamentally, not reinvent the wheel, not be influenced by other wheels that are out there, okay, other things that are off the shelf, which make them less creative by definition. You're gonna need alone time. Anyways, Dr. Thunder, any kind of thing you wanted to add to the recap, thoughts that you had about what we did last time, or anything to say about what I just said?
No, I thought it was a good recap and gets us just about where we need to be to continue the discussion. But we got another super chat in here.
We do we?
Big $20 super chat. And that's RCS. Thank you for your why and how to meditate videos.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, those are excellent videos if folks have not checked those out. And I'll tell you, a lot of the early videos that I put out, if you have not checked those out, you're missing something. Some of those videos where he's riding his bike and with a sort of stream of consciousness, as it were, it's very, very, very good videos. Great information. So
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Couldn't have said it better myself. All right. So we went over 3 points on this video. So they're in point number 4. So let's see what they have to say. We were talking behind stage, Dr. Thunder, that I think that we're going to need to do some synthesis on this video, right? In terms of taking certain points that they may have and putting them underneath the same principle, underneath the same umbrella. Because I doubt there's 15 of anything. There's it's saying 15 ways to improve your creativity. I think they're probably like 4, okay? And then they're just kind of, now, there's nothing wrong with this. Now I'm going off on a tangent here. This is about me, okay? Indulge me here for a second. Now, if you're anything like me, when you see a long list of things, it's a little distracting. I'm looking for the crux. What exactly is the thing? What are the 3 things that this long list is telling me that I can subsume conceptually all these disparate things into something simple? Okay, and this is, by the way, the reason why I studied the kind of engineering that I studied, which is the engineering in the physical space, because in the physical space there are these 2 things you need to know. They're called Newton's laws of motion, and then they're the laws of thermodynamics. Okay? And that's it. There's like 3 laws of motion, okay? Action and reaction, and then F equals ma, basically relating mass, force, and acceleration. And then the laws of thermodynamics talk about how energy can be transformed from one to the other. Everything that you see going on here, rockets going to space, trains moving, the internal combustion engine, it's about these two sets of laws. Okay. So I like to condense things down to very simple things. You can put it in your back pocket and you're done. You can then take this simple toolkit and you can represent reality, physical reality in that case, with these simple things. But anyways, that's enough about me. But I doubt that there are actually 15 things. I think that we're going to have some fun here, breaking them down into smaller bits and pieces, ladies and gentlemen. So fair use. There's been a lot of content lately about fair use on YouTube. I heard you have to add the N word to the fair use, otherwise it doesn't work. So fair use, niggas.
Right.
Number 4, music plays a role. Nothing expands the mind as easily as the journeys we take with different music. Don't underestimate the value of exploring music. New music, old music, music you hate, and music you love. All of it can attune you to new thoughts, ideas, and processes. So don't just stick to what you know and love. Go for something different sometimes.
Okay. So what do you think about this one? Okay, number 4. Rather very simple and short. They say, hey, music helps. What do you think?
Yeah, this is an interesting point. Of course, I have a few thoughts on this. So it depends on what it is that you're attempting, what kind of project you're doing. Okay, so I suppose there's a sort of mind altering, uh, you know, property, effect that music has. Uh, so that sort of kind of abstract, uh, you know, going back to, the muses, as it were. Uh, yeah. So that's fine. I don't know how much you can control that. That seems to be very much abstract, sort of atmospheric, based on your state of mind, your mood, your energy level, um, maybe something you ate earlier that day, um, what kind of wine you're also drinking. Um, so, yeah. But then there's the sort of trying to use music as a sort of background to a particular project. So, say I'm studying for a test, for instance, and I have some Charlie Parker on, or um, trying to go to sleep and having some music on. Those kinds of things. Um, I have a real challenge doing that because um, anytime music turns on, I'm actively participating. So it draws my attention away from what it is that I need to be focusing on. So I would argue, in one sense, that music can actually be a distraction depending on uh, how much sort of deconstructing you're going to do, how much your mind is going to be actually involved in the performance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my wife frequently turns music on. We'll be in the car, and she doesn't do this as much now, but I remember initially, early in our relationship, where she would turn music on in the car, but it wouldn't be loud enough. It would be just low enough to be irritating, like to where I couldn't quite make out what was going on. And so it's like, either turn it off or turn it up louder. But if you turn it up louder, then I'm not going to really be hearing probably what you're saying to me. So it's better to turn it off. And some of that, not everybody's wired the same way, and not everybody has the same experience with music or understands certain aspects of music. And so some of what I'm saying may not apply to everybody. That's fine. But the other component of it, I think, still stands, and that is there is a sort of mind altering, effect that music can have, which can be very positive. And I mean, there's a reason why movies spend so much money on the score. you know,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because it just transforms you, just puts you in a different place totally. So I would agree.
I see. A couple of things are a couple of things were mentioned about the music point here, and I think it relates to the comment that is here on the screen, which is they said to listen to different kinds of music, things you're not used to. It even is related to that whole research aspect. Because remember, we're talking about the ability to synthesize, the ability
Right.
to do something that is new. So you're going to try to force your mind into somewhere that is new. A way to prevent writer's block is to go and go to a concert of some kind of music you would never listen to. Let's say it's music you're trying to write, for example, right? Go listen to some, for me, like, go to a concert of some singer songwriter type that you can consider rather simpy, right? And force
Mm,
yourself to, as long as the guy is good, right?
right.
Let's say a John Mayer type. He's good, but you may find him cringe, right? You go and sit down and listen to John Mayer perform. It'll force you out of, it'll shake you a little bit out of something, right? So you're trying to expand your mind into places where it's forced to think differently, and perhaps it'll be forced to think more fundamentally, and it'll be able to take some things. Now, in addition to what there's, you mentioned something here about, okay, there's something about you sitting down trying to focus, that's one mode, versus you preparing. What I just said is about the preparing thing. You're not trying to write songs while you're listening to John Mayer, right?
Of
But
course.
you're trying to break your mind out of patterns, pre-grooved patterns. You want to jump out of that. Okay. So music is not the only way you can do that. And I mentioned a couple of things about the whole transformative aspect of music that you mentioned. But what I'm touching on here is going to do something new. Another thing is having new experiences. And people say this, it happens with writers of novels and also happens with musicians too. Their first album, okay, is great. They're writing them because the first album, let's say they write an album when they write music when they're 20. It took them 20 years to write that first album in a certain sense, in the sense that it drawing from
Mm,
all this experience and all this stuff, right? So the first album is rich and deep. And then they start going on tour and all they know is tour life. And then inevitably they start writing songs about the road. It's all
right.
about the stage and the road and groupies or something like that. Because
Right.
the experience is getting narrower and narrower. So that's the idea. The first novel is great. And then the next novels are about a struggling writer. It's like that's all they know now is I'm a writer, that kind of a thing. So the idea is beyond whether it be listening to new music or, as it says over here in the screen, studying a new subject. Another thing that's
Yes.
very important for your creativity is to have new experiences. So go drive on some road that you haven't driven before. Something that also works is if you're used to driving, try to walk your neighborhood. If you're not living in some crazy, part of Chicago where your head will get chopped off or something like that, try to walk your neighborhood, because it gives you a very, very different relationship to the space, the distances, the times, the smells, the everything. Again, you're trying to jigger up, shake up your experience such that you force yourself to get out of pre-grooved patterns, which are the enemy of creativity in and of itself. And then one word about the whole music thing. You see, music is the only form of art that goes directly to the emotions without needing to pass through your intellect first. So let's say you see a painting, you gotta see it first, right? There's the light and the colors and the composition, and then it might evoke something, right? There's a mental aspect, and then it evokes an emotion. Music does the reverse, where you hear the music and it goes boom, straight to your emotions, and it starts giving you images. It starts sparking up it gives, you get the idea, right? So that is the thing that is, I just wanted to add to the point that you were saying there's something rather transformative or different about music when it comes to the arts in general. whether it be the written word or the painted stuff or sculpture, the visual arts or the enacted arts, which are basically the writing and then the performing, right? Those things have to pass through a certain set of cognitive functions, filter through, and then they get to the reaction. Music just gets to your reaction immediately, right? And then other things start happening, such as images in your head and so on and so forth. That's why it can be so, shall we say, inspirational, because you don't even know, you didn't think of the image that the music forced in your head, right? That kind of a thing. So, in light of what I just said, in terms of needing to try new things, whether it be reading a new book, walking rather than driving, studying something new, or listening to different kinds of music, having different kinds of experiences, and then whatever else I said about this point number 2. Anything to add before we move on to point number 5 in their list here?
Absolutely. Yes. So yeah, it's interesting. Music does have that power. I think, however, the more you learn about music and you understand why, so you can learn how to sort of manipulate those, the emotions, as it were. Like, you can learn what is causing that manipulation, and then therefore when you hear it, maybe understand, perceive it, maybe at the same speed as you're emotionally receiving it, as it were. But what I wanted to add to that was, a common composer's technique, practice. So say, for instance, if I need to, say, a Mozart, and I don't play clarinet, but I'm about to write one of the most famous clarinet concertos of all time, let me go and start taking lessons from a great clarinetist, so I can learn about the instrument. So it creates it's a new experience, but it's also giving you sort of practical information about what it is that you're about to do, right? So you can learn more of the, ergonomics of the instrument. You can learn more about the range, what the pitch tendencies may be. You can learn more about the usual clarinet repertoire. And so, again, you can be in a place where you can actually be saying something new, right? But it's forcing you to do something new. It's you're getting out of your comfort zone, but also gathering intel, as it were, for the particular project that you're, embarking on. And that's a common thing. I mean, I play a lot of different instruments, and each instrument was a different, caused me to think differently. There's certain recordings that, are ubiquitous, in jazz, ones that everyone has heard, all jazz musicians have heard. And as a kid, when I listened to those, being primarily a horn player, playing a saxophone player, and then flute, and then clarinet later, all of those recordings, when I listen to them now, they sound completely different, because now I play bass, and I play keyboard, and I play guitar. So any recordings that that I have listened to previously, they're totally different recordings now, because I have different angle on those recordings. Also, say, tunes, or I've done these huge transcription projects. I transcribed Via Dolorosa, it's a Sandy Patty, for an Easter one year. And when I say I transcribed it, it's a huge orchestra, and it's got so orchestra plus, like, 2 guitar players. It's this whole thing, and it's all everybody's great musicians, and There's percussion, all this stuff. I transcribed the whole thing. All of the string parts, all of the all the orchestral stuff, all of the what the rhythm section was doing, everything, the entire thing. Now, once you get done with a project like that, of course, that recording sounds different, right? So I think the closer you get to something, I think the more potential that something can actually alter your perception. And so again, you have the sort of, if you don't necessarily understand what the music is, there still is that mind altering sort of a potential that all music has. But even as you get closer to it, it still maintains that ability to change your perception. So,
albeit in a different way. Gotcha.
And then this is one last thing here. There's one last thing here. And I think he was teasing me. Leroy says that Dr. Thunder can't multitask well. Now, if you've seen some of the research associated with these brain scans and things, when people are attempting to do more than one thing at a time, you'll actually know that it's not actually possible to multitask. Humans are not good at multitasking. No human is. Now, you can learn how to do a few things poorly, but you cannot do anything with intensity. But you can't do multiple things with intensity at the same time. And that goes for both men and women, by the way. Women are not better at multitasking than men are. It's like a misnomer. It's like a contradiction in terms. It's a words that are used don't actually fully describe what it is that they're engaging in, but it's not multitasking.
It's not multitasking. One can at best understand it as what you're doing when you're quote unquote multitasking is you're turning your head around. You're moving from one thing to the next thing really quick. You're not ever doing two things at the same time.
That's right.
You're like, okay, and if you can do that, yeah, sure. But just understand that's what you're doing, and you're not being as efficient as if you just stuck with one, right? And this kind of takes my mind into something else, and this is why I say that if for business now, if you're talking about some kind of a way of synthesizing business endeavors. I think Dr. Thunder, you said something about your gift will open doors for you or something like that.
Yeah, your gift makes it. What is it? Your gift will make room for you. Make room for you. That's what.
Make room for you.
Yeah.
More or less, the idea is you want to do things that are more or less on the same street, right? You don't want to be I'm an electrician, but then I also have this tamale business, and then I have this dry cleaning business, and it's at some point you can diversify, but you want to do that through investment, not necessarily you're starting these things. In other words, if you're an electrician, well, then start an electrician business, and then start a reselling of transformers business. They're all kind of on the same street. You're not having to do this crazy thing where you're turning from electrician to work all the way around 180 degrees to look at tamales. It's not going to work out. But that's another word there on multitasking, ladies and gentlemen. So far, I think that
the only things that you can do at the same time, and this is something that I call piggybacking, and actually it's not my name. That's the name for this. And that is when you're doing something that doesn't require any focus accompanied with something that does. So for instance, if I'm driving a car while I'm listening back to a lecture from a an audio recorded lecture or a podcast or something. See, you can focus very much on the podcast. You don't really require any attention, any particular focus on driving. Same thing like running on a treadmill and listening to CGA.
Definitely. So we're talking about doing things, not things that can be outsourced to your unconscious, like breathing, for example. We know you can walk and breathe and chew gum. Okay, that's not what we mean, ladies and gentlemen. So let us continue with this. And so far, I think that the list they've not started conflating things together. So let's see how well they do.
Number 5, creativity is a creature of comfort. Creativity can often be very fragile, especially when we're still finding our niche. For that reason, the environment we choose to flex our creativity in is important. Make sure your space is a conducive environment, not an eyesight of a bunch of things that stress you out or bring you into repetitive past thoughts. For example, plants boost creativity and productivity in one. The University of Exeter conducted a study that proved the benefit of plants in our workspaces. Find a space that boosts your creativity and then enhance it.
All right, hold on. Let me see. Are they moving on or?
Number 6,
Okay, number 6 now. Okay, I think the conflation has slowly begun. What do you have to think? What do you have to say about this space within which you create uh, environment, plants, stuff like that?
Yeah, this is interesting to me because I'm a you frequently use the term alpha your way through things,
Hmm.
right? Um, Sometimes I joke and I tell folks that like I'll play with some great musicians and I thoroughly enjoy myself. And when you're playing with great musicians, it's very easy to play with them. And they make it easy to play. If everyone is at a certain level, it makes it easy to play. And so I'll tell them, I need a challenge. You guys are playing too good. I need somebody playing out of tune, somebody that can't play with a good sense of time. Now that'd be a challenge. Um, but my thing is, I didn't used to think that my environment was particularly impactful on my creative process. And so even stuff like colors, um, if my space is like junked up versus being, pretty, you know, pretty clear of rubbish, you know, um, if the space is sort of off into itself or sort of integrated into another space, um, you know, I never put a lot of stock into that, and then I started to realize that I was actually being quite influenced by the spaces that I was in, and to some extent to the colors.
Hmm.
Um, Now, it's not something that I can measure. I can't say that I'm 20% more productive when you know I don't have clutter, or I'm 20% more creative, and I tend to write my you know uh, only the songs that I wrote when uh, when the blue lights were on reached the top of the billboard charts. The ones with the red lights on, those only get up to 20. So I don't have anything quantitative particularly, but I did start to realize that I am actually influenced by that. I don't know to what extent exactly, but I do know that it's easier to get started.
So I mentioned that perhaps the conflation has begun in terms of this thing could have been combined with point number 3, which was that you need to be alone. Now, what does that mean? I'm saying that, look, they're saying that in order for your mind to be unencumbered, okay, you need to free it of things such as 10,000 cups and trash on your floor, right? Or other people. Before they just said, be alone. Well, why be alone? It's so that you can think clearly, go down fundamentally, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. The
Right.
external distraction in that case was other people. Now, the external distraction will be an environment that is inconducive. And we can imagine what inconducive is versus conducive, right? So they mentioned plants and certain other things. Oh, plants have been found. It's like, okay, that's a good example. It tends to be the case that the closer to the natural state, by natural state, I just mean our natural environment that we can get to, the more comfortable we're going to be. So that's why, the flowing water or the rainfall type sounds and green, like, oh, there's something really nice in them to let me make fun of the woo people. They're like, oh, this is a very spiritual place, I always shake my head at that when people talk like that. No shade to people feeling spiritual things in places, um but obviously there are places that are more conducive and less conducive. You can kind of think of the worst conditions you can be in to be productive, for your mind to be settled. Okay, so you could take these points about, they say, hey, be alone and also have a certain kind of environment, and you can couch them under, hey, you want your mind to be unencumbered by certain externalities. Okay, hopefully they're going to talk about the internal things that you need to clear up too. I think that's probably next, because I saw somebody sitting in the lotus position, right? But any thoughts about the fact that these two, what they talked about before, about being alone and not the right environment, they're kind of pointing at the same thing vis-a-vis how external things will affect your mind?
Yeah, the next point is going to be master your subjective consciousness.
Uh,
No. Yeah, I mean, I liked the point about the like a plant, having a plant in your space. And you're saying that's about like kind of your natural state, trying to replicate your natural state. And so nature, green stuff, okay, natural. Also, uh, a plant is going to also be emitting oxygen. So that may actually, yeah, and that's an interesting thought, because some things we may in our head have an idea of why it's impacting us, but it might actually be something that's actually more scientific than that. So it
Indeed.
could be that the reason that having plants in your creative space is that it's boosting oxygen levels, and maybe oxygen levels are beneficial in the in the creative process.
It
That's
can't
that's
hurt.
just a thought. Well, no, it can't hurt, but I mean, I actually wonder about that. So I wonder if the same sort of effect, or maybe even a boosted effect, of this plant in the space, is just to, when you you just have an oxygen tank in your creative space, and you just you put it on.
Yeah,
You
when
put it
we
on.
finally get to that, in the year 55, 55, when we're in a cocoon somewhere, and we just kind of replicate, you have your boost of oxygen and your shot of serotonin and your whatever, and you're like, okay, you push this
Right,
button and boom, maximum creativity begins to occur. Yeah, I'm a strong believer in those things, obviously, because something as simple as your hydration and your diet, the chemical cocktails that you're subjecting your body to is going to then affect the metabolism, which in very real ways, my friend, will affect you. You mentioned colors before and things such as that, and we just finished talking about the external environment, but basically, uh, there's something that people tend to, and I think you said that you were ignoring it before, but then you realize, hey, it does affect you, right? There's something about, seeing some people more than others, because this is about disgust sensitivity. Shout out to Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson, the psychonometric people out there. So we all have different levels of disgust sensitivity. I have a high level of disgust sensitivity, in the sense that it's another way of talking about order. If you talk about big five personality types, right? I like order, generally speaking. Okay. So if I walk into a bathroom, okay, and there's 15,000 things on top of the sink, and the cabinet is overflowing, the medicine cabinet is overflowing with crap, and That stuff is not just out there. What I mean is, once you see it, it's now in you. Okay.
Yeah.
If you can intuit, ladies and gentlemen, what I mean, it's you can't just leave it out there. It's in your head now, and your head is now freaking disorganized. But if it's nice and clean and everything is where it should be, that also is in you. That's why they say, the inner, outer, reflective, hoarder type situation. Um, but, ladies and gentlemen, let us continue. I see the lotus position. I hope they don't get too cringe with this one. Fair use, fair use.
Slow and steady wins the race. When it comes to creativity, it's a lot like meditation. Don't expect to jump into a 2-hour transcendental meditation session. Getting into a creative state of mind as your default takes a bit of practice, and don't give yourself a hard time if you don't always feel an inspired flow. There's also no perfect time to be creative, and creativity doesn't come from perfect balance or harmony. Quite the opposite. Creativity often comes from the chaos internally or externally, from dealing with anger, grief, or a loss of control. And all of these give you a springboard to be creative from, a leap into space that gives you room to play. If the lines were too straight or the emotions too neat and tidy, then there wouldn't be space for creativity. So embrace the place you're in life and give yourself a break to ease into creativity. Number 7.
Sounds a little bit like self help. Not too bad, not too bad though. Uh, but what I hear there is basically take your time. Number one, okay, and then there's a number two thing there, which we'll get into, which is about using the emotions, especially the turbulent emotions. Which, by the way, are a great way to be creative. But what are your thoughts before I get into it?
Okay. So there are, uh, in general, I'm in agreement with what was said. There are a couple tweaks or uh, maybe other ways to say things that I'd be more comfortable with. Uh, so one of the things that they said was about, um, okay, so you could imply that by creating scenarios where trauma occurs regularly uh, could be someone's process, right? So, for instance, things like drug addiction,
Mm.
right? Um, so, if I am in the practice of creating chaos in my life and creativity is the result, and then in order to actually produce the art that the trauma could inspire, if that's actually the right word to use in that context, um, maybe byproduct is better. Then I have to get high in order to produce enough clarity and enough, as it were, peace, reducing outside sort of effects on my process. It seems to me that there's a lot better ways to do that, more constructive ways. I also think
Mhm.
that we're, in large part, much more in control of our creativity than than um, than we think. There's a great trombonist named Steve Turre, and Steve Turre played. He was the trombonist on the Saturday Night Live band. I think he played in the Tonight Show band also, but he's also a great arranger composer. And his process is to write something every day. Okay, so he sits down and he actually writes, and I'm pretty sure that it's the same time, by the way. So he writes something every day. Now, he's not changing the world with everything that he writes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it's not as, it doesn't come out as easy. Sometimes it's just 6 bars of music. Sometimes it's maybe 20 bars of music, but he writes every day, and then he'll find just the right combination of things, and then there you are. There's your composition emerges from these many writing sessions that are consistent, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I did this thing. I was practicing a little bit before we started, and you shouted out hot licks before I knew you were on the stream yet, or logged in rather yet. And it reminds me, I did for 366 days straight. I improvised a line on a different instrument, and then uploaded those videos, and it was primarily for Instagram, and I also put them on Facebook. But then I started putting them on TikTok, and now I'm also putting them on. This project's been done for about a year now, but I also started uploading them to YouTube Shorts. So you can see those things there called Hot Licks, and there's a book that came out of that where I had someone transcribe all of the lines that I played and then transpose them into all keys. And then there's a PDF for treble clef and for bass clef on my YouTube channel. I'm sorry, on my website, drthundermusic.com. And but that was the same kind of thing where I did something every day, and largely it was at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of my process, it was rather chaotic. So say the first 50 to 75 of these in a row was pretty chaotic, but I realized quickly that I needed a system, because if without a system, I'm likely going to start repeating myself, and it's going to become more and more difficult to actually come up with something that's actually worth posting, right? So yeah, so what I'm saying is there's some truth to what it is that she's saying, but also I think that we actually are more in control of our creativity. I did this is some years back. I did a clinic, a workshop, a master class, a presentation, whatever you want to call it, at a college, a school of music, called Songwriting Without Inspiration. Songwriting Without Inspiration. And the idea here was not to say that this was not a negative thing, right? This was not like we're going to write some crap because we're not inspired. That's not what I was saying. I was saying you can be productive, you can be just as creative when you're not inspired. And there's this kind of discussion and talk about being in control of your talent as opposed to your talent being in control of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in control of your talent, then you call the shots. I need this outcome right now. This is what I have to do. Now, that takes a different level of mastery to get to that level. Now it's not just about, well, I kind of got lucky and I was feeling pretty good, so I was able to write something. No, now it's like, well, this is my job now, and I've written hundreds of songs, and now it's like I can't be just like hoping, let me see which way the wind is blowing. You're beyond that at that point. I mean, Now you need to have
Mhm.
something that consistently works. And so that being in control of your talent is is the way to control that. But how do you develop that ability? How do you develop that control of your talent? That's that could be another that could be another series of videos. But yeah.
Gotcha. They're saying, hey, take your time. They're saying, hey, it's not gonna be all within your control and it's okay. That's why I say it sounds a little bit like self-help. I'm okay, you're okay, it's all okay kind of thing. And then they mentioned, hey, that there is an emotional aspect or turbulence can be very useful. So I'm gonna comment on a couple of things. First of all, with regards to the doing something every day, and it may not be great stuff, but it is good to do. Number one, for obvious reasons such as practice, right? S- Building the muscle. Number two, when it comes to creative stuff, you're gonna need to. It's almost like, uh, pardon the word, excrement. Okay, you're gonna need to put out some crappy stuff before. It's almost like, and it's not a scientific rule, but it's almost like there's some kind of scientific rule that if you don't write the crappy stuff, the good stuff's not going to come out. In other words, like, you're not just going to stop, wait, and only write the gems, only have the gem ideas. It doesn't work that way. Okay, it seems like for me to get one good song, and we've been using music as an example, but this may be business, this may be ideas of any kind. Okay, that are new, okay, that synthesize, that solve problems. You need to, or I need to, just write a few songs, and inevitably, about two out of five of them are going to be crap. Okay, and they never get released. No one ever hears about them, and then the good one comes out. And I'm not completely in control. I know we're talking about control here, but there are two ways to think about control. One is to think about outcomes, like, okay, I just want to be able to control the outcome every time. The other one is to have a system. What I'm talking about is a system. And I think that's what you're talking about also, Dr. Thunder, is I have a system whereby I write every day, and I know that that system will consistently produce maybe two or three good songs out of every five, right? That is control. That is understanding. That is a system, right? I can't just say that every time I sit down, it's going to be boom, gems. So, also, when you mentioned the writing every day thing, which I'm still on, something that anybody can do, and this is something that I did for a while, is I wrote down in a book at the same time. This is right before bed. Right before bed is a good time to do certain kind of routines, because you got to sleep anyways, right? So it's like you got to sleep. So you have this thing right there, and you're like, okay, right before bed, I pick up this book and I write 10 ideas. It's 10 ideas for what? I don't know. It could be 10 ideas for YouTube topics, 10 ideas to grow business, 10 ideas to improve sales, 10 ideas to, I don't care what it is. You just write 10 ideas, force yourself to write 10 ideas in some book every day. This one works like a charm, okay? And you'll be surprised what you come up with when you go back and look through, on day 20, and you see all the ideas that you have. Plus, you're going to build a kind of system, routine, muscle whereby you're used to. I don't like the term brainstorming, but let's just say brainstorming, right? Whereby you're used to that thing of, okay, I can sit down and I can start to enumerate things. Idea number one, X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Just force yourself 10 ideas, 10 ideas, 10 ideas every night, right? And this is going to be, anyways, I think it's self explanatory. Now, let's talk about the fact that emotions are great to create, okay? Now, you say, hey, this might be a dangerous road you're leading people down. But I did a stream recently that said that meaning is equal to experience times consciousness. Experience can be quite intense, okay? Suffering can be intense. And if you bring a little bit of, if you suffer consciously, there's a lot of meaning to it. And you can write good songs out of that. You know, I don't need to explain how that meaning, creativity, complex are kind of related. Okay. You find this, if something is deeply meaningful, deep creativity can come out of it. So Here is that equation. Okay. The experience doesn't need, if the experience is not intense, what other variable do you have to increase? You got to increase the consciousness, right? So you can have very intense experience. Oh my God, my whole family's heads just got chopped off in front of me. Okay, that's pretty intense. And with a little bit of consciousness in there, you can find some deep meaning and good, maybe you can write a novel or something. But if you're just having a more mundane experience, just walking down the street, then you need to ramp up the consciousness up. You need to tune up that consciousness. Basically, we're talking
Mhm.
about something similar to being in the zone. You can be in the zone because, oh my God, I just saw an alien spaceship landing in front of me. You're like, I'm in a trance right now. Or you can get in the trance just by walking down the street with a high level of consciousness, looking at a leaf. Can I get a one in the chat if that makes sense? Okay. Basically, there are two variables here. There is the experience, and then there's the consciousness that you bring to bear upon the experience. Okay, that's equal to what you're looking for. Experience times consciousness. If you're not having crazy experiences every day, and now you're forcing yourself to take drugs to induce crazy experiences, you just need to be able to understand that you can always up the consciousness. It's not easy. Okay, there are ways of mastering that as well, but this is about mastery, right? As Dr. Thunder already alluded to. So those are my comments on this one. That whole experience thing. Emotions are great for writing songs. Like for me, being in a particularly low mood is the better one that works for me. Being elated, being manic, almost that never really produces good stuff. Okay, but when things are things are a little weird, things are a little dark, then
So what you're saying is weed works better than Coke.
weed works better than coke. Yeah, quite literally. Okay, anybody who's been around coke heads, whether it be business ideas or music, like it's not good. It's not good stuff that they think they're being great. Like no, 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 no. It's not.
So, so just a couple things to add. I interviewed the great pianist Keiko Matsui in October, mid-October, and um, and she's a pretty prolific composer, known mostly as a smooth jazz artist. She's played with Miles Davis and a bunch of others, just a long list of folks. It was a good conversation. Um, and in her writing process, and she's had, what, dozens of recordings out as the leader, in much of the time, almost all of the compositions are her own on a project. She will write 100 songs and then pick the 10 that she wants to go on the record. And and so that is now the thing is that the 90 songs that are left over, this is not to say that those 90 songs are garbage, and maybe some of those songs end up making it onto another project, right? At a later date, but that's her. So 10%, only 10% of the songs make it to the recording.
That's as they say, goals as the millennials used to say before they got old and got kids and shit.
There was one other thing I was going to say. Yeah. So I've been watching the Showtime series, watching this again, Dexter.
Uh-oh.
And Dexter had something really traumatic happen to him when he was a kid. And like his mother was killed in front of him. And so it kind of ruined him, in a matter of speaking. He's a serial killer, but his father, before he passed away, gave him a very specific code that would allow him to still act on his on the wishes of his, as he describes, his dark passenger, while still actually doing something that may actually be bettering society, because he's basically hunting other serial killers
Mm-hmm.
and he kills them. And so I've gotten back to season 7. So season 7 is when his sister finally finds out that he is the Bay Harbor butcher, and so now she's trying to help him to to kick this this addiction that he has. Um, okay, so we'll see how that goes, right? But I just said that to say that if we are stoking our dark passengers, and all of us have a dark passenger, by the way. His dark passenger is just particularly violent, but all of us have a dark passenger. But if we're stoking our dark passenger in hopes that creativity will emerge in a particular in a controlled way, I think we're going to be in for a rude awakening.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So the wine thing that was mentioned, which wine is just another depressant. Someone said they don't do weed, but they do wine. It's like, oh, it's probably even a more powerful depressant than the weed. But I remember now I don't really, I drink like once every 6 months now. And I just kind of limited to certain kinds of social occasions. Last time I had a drink was when I met Game Changer. I met Game Changer in person in the Bay Area. We had dinner, and that's the kind of time where it's like, okay, go ahead, I'll have a couple of water. I was pulled over later that day, by the way, but had me blow a breathalyzer and all that kind of stuff. And but I'm a pro. I know when to start driving after having had dinner and stuff. Plus, I'm over 200 pounds. That helps to get rid of the alcohol. Point is, I used to kind of my thing, as I mentioned, depressive mood is what really kicks my creativity. So a glass of wine and kind of rummaging through the head there. But I knew that you can't. It was like an instinct, right? It's just, you just instinctively know certain things. Like you need to not use this as a crutch, like, or depend on this crutch, or like once in a while it's fun if it coincidentally you have some wine around or something and whatever. But the toxicity of the whole situation was kind of just evident to me that okay, this is not good. This is you need to wean yourself out of it. Again, experience times consciousness. It's always better to do things independent of these kind of external perturbations or whatever it is, putting things in your body, blah blah blah. The harder way is to be able to quote unquote master your subjective consciousness, right? Ain't that right, Dr. Thun? But anyways,
That's right.
let's do one more. Let's see what they've got here. Let's see what they've got here for another one. Number 7.
Avoid interruptions. Interruptions stifle the creative process. Being pinged out of an immersed moment by an unimportant message is such a waste of creative flow. If you want to enjoy and encourage creativity in your life, you need to let your soul, your mind, and yourself wander far and wide without always being brought back to the room you're in every 5 minutes. Switch off the internet, mute your phone, and you'll give your creativity time and space to shine. Number 8. There are
All right. In addition to continuing to being cringe, okay, the conflation has now becoming heavy now. It's like, dude, you told me to be alone, okay? And then you told me to find a space that's comfortable. And now you're telling me to avoid interruptions. Dude, I get it. Like I find this kind of thing to be annoying. I already said it before, but because it's a very number one, I find it to be counterproductive to be telling people, giving people long lists is counterproductive. Number two, you're treating them like babies. If you just tell them, look, it's best when your mind is unencumbered by, shall we say, external distractions and internal distractions. Hence, go away because it is related to your ability to be able to think fundamentally, and then you'll be able to do that synthesis, which is important to creativity. That's all you got to remember, right? I don't got to tell you like, you know what? Anyways, I don't want to keep on harping on that. But what do you have to say about this? Turn off the cell phone, turn off the internet, do not be distracted type stuff. What do you have to say about that?
So this is interesting, and yes, there's a lot of conflation. Uh, Even with the conflation, though, something about the way they put that just causes me to think about this. This is the usual thing that I talk to my students about, which is this, focus versus tunnel vision. Focus versus tunnel vision. So, tunnel vision is when, this is something you're not actually in control of, right? So you see a shiny object, and that shiny object, it causes you to lose perspective on everything else except for the object, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are some shiny objects that we kind of know what the tendency is going to be. For instance, for me, like if I buy a new piece of gear, like a new piece of equipment for my studio, something that people would relate to is getting a new phone, right? So what happens is you're drawn in by the phone. You're spending way more time interfacing with it than you would, and you're not even trying to. It doesn't even take any energy, it seems, right? But there's a difference between that and focus. Focus is the ability to remove distractions. So, in other words, you have no blinders on, you have no shiny object, but you have the discipline to be able to focus on what it is that's necessary to focus on. Okay. Now, of course, this is not the kind of thing that you're going to immediately be better at, or good at, rather, just because you decided that you're going to try. No. This is the kind of thing that can take a lot of time. Now, the idea about turning off your cell phone, turning off this, one thing I tell my students when they're going in the practice room, you want to have an agenda, all of that. You want to try to eliminate as many distractions as possible. So I want them to have dedicated devices. I always talk about the 5 tools, for productivity in the practice room. One of them is a metronome. Another one is a tuner. Another one is some kind of recorder, so they can record themselves, video themselves, and watch back. The third thing is the fourth thing is a timer. And then the fifth thing is some sort of logging system. So you can document what it is that you've actually done. Now, with respect to the fourth thing, the timer, a timer is different than a clock, right? A timer you can preset to a certain amount of time. And then when that time elapses, the timer will tell you that the time is over.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're constantly looking at a clock on the wall, you're breaking focus. If you're interfacing with your phone in order to provide some sort of metronome for practicing scales or something, then that's going to be a problem, right? Because you're going to start seeing notifications, and you're going to start like that, right? So having having devices, standalone devices for each one of those tasks is going to be better. Maybe it means that you have to carry a few more things around, but it's going to end up working. Now, the timer idea, I didn't invent that, right? And lots of folks have used timers in practice sessions way before I was alive. So, but where I'm borrowing this from is actually something quite a bit older than that. And that's something that you find in the monastic tradition. We talk about monk mode in the space here, but there's the real monks, the monastics, in particular, in this context, the Christian monastics, where, like, what rosary beads are. So that's like the Catholic version of this. But then there are prayer ropes, right? And what a prayer rope is, and the beads work the same way, is there's a certain number of knots, and then there's a marker. So what you can do is, say, for instance, if I'm going to say a particular prayer and I want to say it 30 times, right, there's a marker at 30. So I don't have to be looking at the clock on the wall. I don't have to be counting how many times have I said it. How many times was that? No, I'm 15. Oh, I lost my place. 60. No, all you do is you just move to the next knot and move to the next knot. So you can dial into very, very deep concentration, but also be keeping track of what it is that you've accomplished. Right? So when they started talking about the whole, eliminating distractions and all of that, there are some practical things that you can do, and some tools that are just commonplace tools. I have here it is. This is a kitchen timer, right? And it's a double timer, right? So I've got like an analog on one side and a digital on the other side. And so on one side, I can just type the amount of time I want. The other one, I can, if I would prefer the analog, then I can do that. But that's something very cheap, and something that you can put into your whatever your routine is. You also need to know how much time it's going to tend to take you to produce a particular result, right? So you can't say, okay, well, I'm all about putting things on the calendar and all of that. That's great. But you can't say, okay, well, I have this big project, let me give it 20 minutes. So obviously you're not going to get anything done in 20 minutes. There's certain kind of projects that you embark on, and certain creative projects in particular, that are just going to take larger blocks of time. But you can still control events that you're doing within that time, so that you're not wasting time. So, yeah.
100%. So, want to give a shout out to
absolutely super sticker Kyodor, $49.99 super chat. Let's go.
Indeed. And creativity, as we know, is difficult for some people to even define, but we have been almost assuming a whole lot of the habits that it would require to be effective in other endeavors anyways. Calendars, routines, so on and so forth. Okay, so creativity is depend on how you like to talk about things, is on the high level in terms of getting things done, right? So you really already it is not a 101 course, right? Oh, getting things done. Oh, let's talk about creativity. It's like no, you already got to have a lot of fundamentals down. You already got to be into stuff. In other words, you got to have problems to solve. You can't just be like, I'm just sitting eating Cheetos and playing video games. Let me see how I can improve my creativity. It's like, no, you're out there in the world doing things, and then problems arise. Problems about how to scale your business, problems about how to write a new song. Okay. Then you're looking into, well, how can I use these kinds of, shall we say, techniques? So today we looked at four more. Okay, we did three last time, and then we looked at four more. So we've done seven so far. Okay, and here's what I remember. The first one that they went into was about the music thing, which to me was about research in the sense that you're going to break out of certain patterns, certain pre-grooved patterns, new kinds of music, okay? And putting yourself in a particular state where you're able to think fundamentally. It may not be the best thing to do, as Dr. Thunder pointed out, when you're actually working, but in order to prepare yourself for work, in order to get your mind into a certain state. So one of the important parts about the music thing was, different kinds of music. And then there are two things that they mentioned, which again I think are part of the whole don't be distracted by external things. Okay. Last time, in the last video, they talked about alone time. And then they talk about a particular kind of room. And then they talk about the distractions, which is the last thing we just said. Okay. So two, which is find a space which is conducive to this. Okay. And you can imagine the least conducive space and then just move away from that. Right. Because some people always thought, like you mentioned the alpha and your way through stuff. People have this habit of wanting to say, oh, I can do anything anywhere. It's like, okay, fine. Okay. What we're saying is imagine hell, okay, and and try to make the place less hellish if you're trying to be more creative. Then they mentioned something. Then the whole time, the whole less distractions things. All those things are combined. And then there was the whole thing about the subjective internal space, which is, hey, creativity is going to take time, and the emotions that perturb you or disturb you are also useful. And then we talked about how to harness that. And then I gave that equation of experience times consciousness equals to meaning, or it could be creativity in this case. Creativity equals experience times consciousness. You can always up the level of consciousness. Walking your dog, as somebody mentioned, okay, just walking your dog down the road every day with a lot of consciousness to a seemingly mundane experience can be rather inspiring, if you want to use inspire now rather than creativity, right? You don't have to wait to see a UFO or for something crazy to happen in that case. And Dr. Thunder gave examples about how to routinize certain things. Now we're talking about systems that will guarantee over time certain outcomes. So if you're going to write a song every day, like I believe the person from Saturday Night Live you mentioned, right? Or if your system is to write 100 songs and then pick out the 10, or I was saying that for a period of time, and maybe I'll start again, but it's just a routine that I go in and out of. Before bed, I have this book that I write 10 ideas in, and it's specifically just to be able to be like, give me 10 ideas on X, go, right? What can you do in that time? And how thinking on your feet is very important as to when it comes to influencing people, selling, and all that kind of stuff, which is a little bit of a hobby of mine, if you will. In other words, being able to dilute the concepts of influencing and persuasion and give it. So besides just working the idea muscle, it helps you to think on your feet, to just write 10 ideas about anything, okay? 10 ideas about this, 10 solutions to this, whatever it may be, every night, okay? So again, that's mainly what we're seeing. Two of the things that we saw today can be put under the don't be distracted by the external environment. Obviously, turn off the phones and all those kinds of things. Find a kind of room that is conducive. And then music, okay, which is basically saying, look, you gotta listen to different kinds of music, put your mind in a particular state which is away from the regular, read different kinds of books, walk if you're used to driving, have different kinds of experiences so that you're not just doing the same thing over and over again. Okay, this is obviously amenable to being creative. And the last thing being that your emotions are part of the game too. Okay, your subjective state is part of the game, and there is a way of gaming that as well, as opposed to just depending on drugs or waiting for inspiration. Any final thoughts, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, a couple things. You say creativity. Um, we tend to do this thing where we'll say, you know, everybody's creative, anybody can be creative. Kids are some of the most creative folks. And um, I think we need maybe a different word for that, uh, because if creativity is this high of this lofty thing that requires a mastery at sort of the pedestrian levels, and then the intermediate levels, and then the advanced levels, and then to reach to the level of real creativity, um, because there's, even in the research component of, sort of getting yourself to that place where you can truly be creative. If you're just replicating what other folks have done, if you're just doing the same thing, if you're recreating the wheels, you're not actually being creative. In one sense, you'd still actually be, you're still being creative in one sense, even if someone else has created something that you didn't know about. But with respect to the usefulness of it, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And then, I say this thing frequently, you have to prepare for spontaneity. There's that component of it where it seems it's not, it is counterintuitive. It's this counterintuitive thing. It's like, well, wait a minute, isn't creativity the easiest thing that you can do? So, well, I mean, randomness, wild abstraction, that's pretty easy to do. But creativity seems to still need to have some sort of orientation to a common language, whatever the structure you're trying to manipulate. You have to be able to manipulate something that is already defined, or within a defined structure, as opposed to do these abstract things and say, hey, that's creative. It's like, well, how much does that take? I guess a baby taking, his hand, putting it in some paint and walking over to a canvas and putting it on there, that's creative too then, right? So there's some of that kind of part of the conversation. Maybe we can continue that next time. But I do want to say, I interviewed J.R. Wisdom. We had a really good conversation. Interviewed him last night. That interview premiered on my YouTube channel. It premiered earlier this morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it was called Balance in the Black Manosphere, with a question mark. And so that was a really good conversation. I don't know if you know about this, about J.R. Wisdom. He's done a number of Kevin Samuels reaction videos, which is what initially kind of turned me on to him. And but he does other things also. He's got about 42,000 subs now. He's doing good works, getting a lot of views, and has not always the same sort of usual view in response reaction to Kevin's content, but then also a lot of the other kind of things that he talks about. Definitely a red pill guy, definitely a manosphere guy, but kind of an interesting twist on certain things. We had, I thought, a really good conversation, and that kind of focused on the Black community. Um, Tomorrow night, I'm interviewing Chantel Simone, our good friend, Chantel Simone, um, friend of Ike's channel, friend of my channel. And as I said before, she is blowing up. It's really, some things she, talk about somebody that's consistent. She's been very, very consistent for a long time. Very, very consistent, and she's working the system, and it's working. So I'll be interviewing her, and this is going to be the second interview on my Conversations with Dr. Thunder series. So that interview will be Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then also I'm interviewing Scott Devine, who's a great musician, great bassist, great educator. He's got a huge YouTube channel, 500,000 subs or something, and it's all like this bass education stuff, and he's kind of really cornered the market in that, and so that's going to be a really good conversation. And I'm not sure when I'm going to premiere that, because that interview's on Friday, and I'm not sure if I'm going to premiere it on Saturday or on Monday or something, but be looking out for that. And then on Thursday, this coming Thursday, I've got a Thunder's Thoughts coming up. That Thunder's Thoughts is going to be on the whole triple-digit notch count in order to be considered an alpha, sort of. Can I call it a trope? But it's a constantly said thing in the sort of manosphere spaces, as a way to sort of kind of deaden your anxiety when you're dealing with women and stuff like this. So I'm gonna examine that proposition. If is that useful? Does it make sense to try to do that? Is that actually necessary? And does it cause any kind of damage to the folks that are and where do you get the time to do that? Like, if you're trying to actually be productive, and say for instance you're in law school, I mean, how many more notches are you going to be able to get on your belt when you're in law school? So anyhow, I'm kind of showing my hand a little bit where I come down on that, but it's going to be a good conversation with Dr. Doug. And yeah, I mean, that's and I've been doing these impromptu live streams, and folks have been digging those. The last one I did was let's see here, the difference between good sense and common sense. So check those out. Those are usually early mornings. I just get up and I turn it on and go. Those are in a playlist on my YouTube channel called Struggle Stream. So yeah, those are my my struggle streams. I don't have any of the technology or anything. It's just me in the car. So there it is. That's all my stuff. Look forward to our conversation next week, getting ish done with Ike. Of course, we have our case closed on Sunday, I think, this coming Sunday at 4. I'm not sure whose channel it's going to be on. Is it going to be on Solo's channel?
I believe so, until January, before the rotation begins.
That's right.
So I believe it's solo.
Yeah.
All right. And then Snuggles shows up with the 2 eyes watching. We're watching you too, Snuggles. We are gone. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.
in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners.